Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. But what about the civilians? They're expendable. Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Gersh, and this week we are doing another movie review. This is The Blob, released in 1988, directed by Chuck Russell, and yes, this is a remake of the 1958 classic starring Steve McQueen. This film stars Kevin Dillon, Shawnee Smith, Donovan Leitch, and Jeffrey DeMunn. Yes, Kevin Dillon, the younger brother of Matt Dillon, of course, and he looks and acts exactly like Matt Dillon. So yes, The Blob from 1988, definitely, in my eyes, kind of a hidden gem. A great remake of the original classic, which kind of was a B-movie back then, you know, but still a really fun film to watch, the original with Steve McQueen. And this film, like The Thing from 1982 from John Carpenter, was kind of a box office failure, you know, where they didn't even recoup the money they spent on it, you know. And it was only about $10 million, which is kind of small by today's standards when they spend like $200 million to make a movie. But you can see in this film all that money went towards the practical effects in this film, because the practical effects in this film are some of the best I've ever seen. You know, it's fantastic, and it just looks great, and the movie holds up so well to this day, you know. Which is why I think the film has kind of developed a cult following, not quite to the extent of The Thing, where people hail it as a classic now. But it's got a cult following. But yeah, I think it's just like a hidden gem. So what happens in the film, you know, a meteorite crashes onto Earth, you know, from outer space, it seems. Or so it seems. And out of the meteor becomes this primordial ooze, this amoeba-like substance, this kind of, I don't know, bacteria. And it latches on to this old man, this old homeless dude, you know, gets on his arm and it starts spreading through his body, you know, and it's like eating him up, you know. And Kevin Dillon kind of runs into this guy and, you know, kind of tries to help him, and they end up bumping into Shawnee Smith, who is the head cheerleader of high school. They almost run him over with the car, and then they all kind of go at the old man and rush him to the hospital. And in the hospital you can see the substances growing more. And the doctor there doesn't know what the hell to do about it. And when they take a closer look at the old man, the substance has completely eaten the lower half of his body. It's really nasty. And then Meg's boyfriend, who's played by Shawnee Smith, is trying to help too. And meanwhile, the blob substance is going up the ceiling, and then he looks up and it plops right down his body and eats him alive. And the girl Meg tries to help him, and he's like, you can see him, you know, his face is decaying, all nasty. The blob has covered his body, is eating him alive, you know. Really cool effects in this film. I love it, you know. Much better than the original classic, I would say, as far as the effects go. And the cast is pretty solid, but, you know, it is kind of a little bit of the campy 80s feel to it as far as the acting goes, but they do a good enough job, you know. At times it almost feels like a slasher movie in a way, like an 80s slasher where it's kind of taking people out one by one, you know. It kind of sneaks up on people, you know. Like at one point, a woman tries to get out and call for help in the phone booth, you know. The days of the phone booth, yes. And the Blob just crawls up the phone booth and like smashes through, you know. And there's one funny scene where this guy's kind of at the make-out point with his girlfriend, you know, trying to get it on, and she like falls asleep while he's making his own little concoction from his trunk, which is funny. This kid's got this little bar in his trunk, and he's like mixing up the cocktails. And then when he gets back to the car and finds her sleeping, he decides to try and take advantage. You know, he puts his hand down the girl's bra and yeah, tentacles come out at him, you know. Yeah, the Blob develops these tentacles. It becomes like a real monster, you know. Gobbles him up. And then the one guy at the restaurant, there's something like caught in the sink. The sink's clogged and the water's kind of overflowing. So he's like, I got this. He grabs the plunger and he keeps trying to plunge it and nothing's happening. And he sees this substance, this gooey, gross substance. And the Blob almost looks like a hand grabbing his face and grabs him through this sinkhole, and you see his head like crushed and his whole body is consumed down the sinkhole. It's pretty awesome. You see the blood coming up, you know. And there's not a whole lot of blood, surprisingly. It's just kind of more like sci-fi kind of effects. You don't see a whole lot of blood splatter everywhere. It's kind of done in a way where, you know, just the Blob covering them up and eating them from the inside kind of thing. But man, awesome effects. I gotta tell you, it looks so good, and it's way better than what you could do today with CGI, in my opinion. And it holds up so well when you watch it today. So guys, definitely grab the Scream Factory Edition on Blu-ray. Great. The movie just looks fantastic. And they do find a weakness to the Blob over time. They find that it's resistant to the cold. Yeah, it can't handle the freezing cold. So yeah, as the movie goes on, they find that out and they start trying to, you know, freeze it up, you know. And what happens is the Blob gets down into the sewer and kind of grows bigger and bigger and bigger, and then comes the whole town is trying to take it out. Even the government comes in, you know, with their biometric unit, you know. And it turns out that the meteorite is not just a meteor from outer space. It turns out that the meteor is some kind of satellite, some government satellite. So yes, created by the government, and inside the meteorite is holding this experimental virus. So what's going on here? You know, it's kind of art imitating life here, you know. So yes, it turns out the government created this virus. Yes, ahead of its time, isn't it? Kind of like, you know, COVID. Oh, man. So yeah, the government comes in and is trying to contain the substance they created because they want to use it as chemical warfare against, like, Russia or something. So yeah, crazy stuff. Definitely sending a message there about life, you know, art imitating life. So I thought that was great, you know. And apparently the people are expendable. So at any cost they have to contain this substance, this ooze, before it gets out of control and spreads throughout the whole world, you know. But they just want to contain it so they can use it in a chemical warfare against Russia. So yeah, it's crazy, it's awesome. And yeah, once the Blob gets into the sewer and it comes out, it's like freaking gigantic. So it becomes an awesome epic finale to destroy the monster that is the Blob, the primordial ooze that they created. So, such an exciting film, such a hidden gem in my eyes. I just think it's a fantastic film. It's one of the best remakes of all time. So definitely run and grab the Blob on Blu-ray from Scream Factory. I give it 2 devil horns up. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Urshan, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared. Folks, don't forget to grab your Sean Patrick Urshan gear and represent the Horror Corner. Also, check out these awesome mugs we have, perfect for your coffee. And definitely check out the Horror Hangout live stream t-shirt and represent the legacy of the Horror Hangout. Check out the link in the description below this video.